Approval Center. His brokerage deals with 15 mortgage lenders, including major banks, credit unions, and exclusive lending institutions. Mark works with the borrowers to find them the best rate and most suitable mortgage product. Let Mark work for you. To learn more, call Mark for your free consultation at 705-254-9670.
Good evening, everybody. We're here today for the Sports Talk episode with Kyle Barber from Eastern Ontario Greyhound Scout. Tony Boniferro, Jim Monico. Kyle, you probably don't like to hear that voice all the time doing that introduction, do you?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Like you say, hearing Jerry's voice all the time?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it.
So, Bono, what's that?
It's also great to see Mark as the sponsor. I grew up knowing him a little bit too, so it's awesome to see he's still connected to this.
Yeah, he's really involved with youth sports, and again, still referees a little bit. So he likes what we're doing and getting it out there. So Bono and Jim, I'll turn it over to you, and go ahead, Bono.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks for joining us today. I've known Kyle for a lot of years. Him and I grew up together, played a lot of street hockey against each other, and we've obviously been in contact throughout the years. So once Kyle moved to the Ottawa region and became involved in hockey down there, and he coached at all sorts of levels down there, coached AAA, did a real nice job down there, and was able to turn that into a job as a scout for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. So obviously, the Greyhounds are very well connected here in the Soo, and they're pretty popular. I'm a huge fan of the Greyhounds, growing up with them like everybody. I remember the Memorial Cup days, the Tony Yob days, back then. And so it's really been a blessing, and I've really enjoyed having Kyle as a scout, because now it's nice to be able to talk hockey and kind of get a little bit of the background and a little bit of an inside scoop with what's going on. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, Kyle. We really appreciate you coming on, and thanks for joining us today.
No problem, Bono. It's the least I could do when you picked me up at the airport that one time.
Yeah, it was like 3 times, but we'll say once.
That's true, yeah.
yeah. So just, you're from the Soo. Obviously, you grew up here in the Soo. Just talk a little bit about how you ended up in Ottawa, how you got involved with hockey down there, that type of stuff.
Yeah, like growing up in the Soo, you're just like every other kid, right? Like the NHL is nice to watch, but everybody just really kind of lived and died the Greyhounds, especially that run we had. We went to 3 straight Memorial Cups, and it was awesome. Like that's all I ever wanted to do was play for the Hounds. And obviously I wasn't going to get there as a hockey player, but this kind of worked out for me. So my mom moved the family down right before the Y2K. She got a job with kind of doing like some computer programming in Ottawa with the government right before that. So we moved out, but we spend most of the summers in the Soo. Like I used to see you pretty well all summer at parties and stuff like that when we come back home. So it's almost like I never left, right? We still have a cottage just north of Pancake. So like we spent a lot of time in Sault Ste. Marie in general. So just that's kind of what brought me to Ottawa, but I've never really lost that Soo connection. I always kind of consider myself like a Soo boy deep down.
Sorry to interrupt. You know he's on Southern Ontario person now because he calls it a cottage, not a camp, right?
You're right. I messed that up. As soon as I said that, I was like, oh, I messed that up for sure. I'm going to get ripped for that. Delatenta is going to be all over me. We got a camp just north of Pancake.
So how does a guy your age, you moved down to Ottawa shortly before, 1999-ish. You talked a little bit about that. So you're you don't know a lot of people down there, right? And breaking into a big hockey community could be difficult, especially for newcomers. How were you able to break into the AAA world in Ottawa, and how did that go about with you?
I just finished out my minor hockey. I didn't play anything. I played like lower level competitive here. And then I went to university. And then in university, I kind of met one of my buddies. He was from Sudbury, and he decided he was going to coach like an Adam Rep B team, which is like a tier 3 competitive team. He asked me to do it like for about a month and a half. And then I just kept saying, no, I'm not interested in coaching. I'm like 24 years old. I don't want to coach hockey. That's a big commitment. And then he kind of got me at the right point night at a wedding reception and asked me again. And I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. So then he called me a couple of days before tryouts, and I kind of forgot that I agreed to it. But since I agreed, I said I'd go. And then I loved it. Like after the first round of tryouts, I'm like, I'd love to work with these kids all year. We had a great year. We ended up winning everything, and then I just moved up. We did Major Pee Wee AA, which is considered AAA back then in Ottawa. The following year, we had a pretty good team. We had a couple guys that like ended up playing the OHL. We had Patty White on that team. We had Medric Mercier, who played for the Hounds. Alex Renault played for Sarnia and Oshawa, and Brent Morin, they're the goaltender. He played in Flint, played in North Bay. So we had a really good team. We had a pretty good success that year. And then the next year I kind of started off on my own. I got my job as a head coach, minor Bantam AA. We had a good year that year. We won the Sudbury Silver Stick. A funny story, ended up stealing the trophy after we won that one. So didn't do it on purpose, but it was a snowstorm, and like it was delayed, and all the volunteers had gone home. So I brought the trophy home with me, and it stayed there until they contacted me. Did you take that? I'm like, yeah, I got it, because then you didn't have anybody to give it back to. But so then I kept working up from there, and then I got in with the 67s organization. I was their Major Pee Wee AAA coach the first year they had Major Pee Wee. We had a great year on that tier. We had a pretty solid team as well, 4 or 5 OHL guys that ended up on that team. There's a couple of guys that are still in the league, be playing as always this year if we get started again. And then I moved up, I did that year in minor Bantam, and then I coached minor midget AAA. The last year they did minor midget AAA in Ottawa. Now it's like the U18 model, the AAA model they run here. So so that was the last year to had the 67s. We had a pretty good year that year. We had Greg Morellis was kind of our top guy. Jacob Paquette played as an OA last year. So Nick McHugh. So we had a pretty good squad there. So, and that's kind of how I got there. And that's kind of how I made the connection with a lot of the OHL guys for that minor midget year.
So then how did you get on to be the Eastern Ontario scout for the Soo Greyhounds?
I had met Kyle Raft at a U15 camp, a program of excellence camp that the OHL used to run when he was working for the league. And then obviously he was named GM the year I was the head coach of the 67s and minor midget. So just seeing him at tournaments and or showcase games in Ottawa and stuff like that just developed a bit of a friendship, talking to him a little bit throughout the year, trying to hype some of our players to be drafted by the Hounds. Unfortunately, none of them were. So then I just kind of talked to him like, did you guys have a need in Ottawa? And then he's like, we'll look into it a little bit more and I'll let you know. And then I got a phone call from him and saying, hey, if you're interested, we'd love to have you on board. And like, that was a no-brainer for me. I didn't even consult my wife or anything like that. I'm like, this is what we're doing now. It's the Soo Greyhounds. It's the closest thing I'm going to get to putting on that jersey. So it was an easy decision for me.
So I talk a little bit about the life of a scout. We look at it from the outside and we think to ourselves, hey, you get to live in a rink, you get to talk to kids all day, talk to parents all day, watch hockey all day. Sounds like a pretty good gig, right? But I know that there's a lot more to it than that. So just talk a little bit about what an average hockey season looks like for you.
It's kind of different this year, right? Like you're kind of missing your landmarks a little bit. So like the life of a scout is actually I think it's pretty great, and especially the way the Greyhounds treat us. Like I don't have any, I have zero complaints about how the ownership treats us, how Kyle treats the scouts. We're all treated really well. The way it starts off the year is like we do training camp. We all attend training camp. I've been like lucky enough to kind of coach in some red-white games. Coach like on the bench in the inter squad games. Had some fun doing that. And I love training camp. And then the following weekend, you're right into the scouting season. You're into the Toronto Titans tournament, which is kind of like one of your biggest tournaments because everybody's there at the start of the year. You probably about 50 to 60 teams. You kind of get it. You probably don't get to see everybody, but usually from that tournament, you kind of have a little bit of a baseline. And then I like to come back to Ottawa because the Ottawa teams don't play in it. So I like to see that first to kind of know what else is out there before I can kind of make a recommendation on whether an Ottawa kid fits in and that sort of thing afterwards. So then I'll scout the Ottawa League till about the Whitby Silver Stick. And then we'll all get together in Whitby. So Whitby's one of your bigger ones because it's invite only for the minor midget. And it's usually your top teams, your top players from both US and Canada are there. And it's all hands on deck for that one. So all the scouts are there. We usually have a mid-year meeting. We'll kind of come up with a preliminary list of about, 150, 200 players that we like throughout the year. That so far, guys that we should key on, guys that we should look at in different spots. And then from that list, we'll kind of go back to our home centers, watch again, guys that we've identified. And then you get to the Marlies tournament. And then Peterborough, we do another mid-year meeting, OHL Cup, same sort of thing. Everybody's usually all hands on deck. Everybody goes to the OHL Cup. And then we're right into the draft in early April. So that's kind of what it's like. kind of like good things of like being in, like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. You get to watch hockey, you get to talk hockey, you get to talk like meaningful hockey again. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I got into coaching in the first place too, is to kind of like have meaningful conversations about hockey again. And like hockey that kind of means something. Like, you get to men's league, you're like, man, did you see that guy two-handed me? Like, really, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you didn't back check. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not getting paid for this, right? But it's like in the OHL, you're actually having like meaningful conversations about hockey that like actually matters. Like, you're talking about a kid that you really like could be in the NHL someday. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's fun to actually have those conversations. One of the worst things about being a scout that like nobody really considers, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but some of these rinks are really cold and you're there a long time. Like that Friday in Whitby, or in that Canland rink at the Marlies tournament, where like that rink is like, it's seriously cold. It's like almost as cold as Echo Bay's arena is.
Wow.
Like it's freezing. So you're there probably like anywhere between 8 and 10 hours a day, just standing there watching hockey. Yeah, it's fun, but it's like, I know I sound like a Southern guy already because I'm complaining about the cold, but that's probably my biggest complaint. Is like, and sometimes you step in a puddle and your feet are wet all day, and you're like, oh man, it's gonna be a long day. But other than that, I think it's what it's cracked up to be, right? It's a lot of writing after the fact too. So like, we got to write reports on pretty well every game we go to. So you go to a tournament and you watch like, say, like 45 games, you got to kind of have some good notes or a good memory to kind of remember everybody you saw. But I think I think it's pretty great. So,
Kyle, I got a question. I got a question for quick, Bono. Kyle, when does a player come on your radar? So you go into for the first tournament of the season. You're walking the rink. You're looking. Are you looking at draft age kids only? Are you looking at the younger kids that when do you find out about a kid and when do you start watching them? Is it just the draft year?
For me, it's mostly just the draft year. If there's a kid that's like lighting it up in Bantam locally, or say OHFs are hosted in Ottawa, I'll duck my head in and then kind of write like a finder's list report. But for me, it's the draft year. Personally, I kind of have like a bit of like a pet peeve with like teams running spring tryouts and stuff like that. I always find like a summer can do a world of good for a kid who's committed and wants to put in the work. So like a lot of times you'll roll into like in the season, you do tryouts the next week and then like your team's made, right? So that kid who maybe grows like 5 or 6 inches or puts the work in, you don't kind of see it as much. So I don't put a ton of stock in a Bantam. I know a lot of guys do, but it's more or less just kind of, this kid's pretty good. Let's see what he looks like next year. And then I usually just watch him throughout the draft year. So if I like him in the Titans tournament, or the first couple of weeks in Ottawa, that's where they start to get on the radar a little bit more. And obviously, as you see more teams throughout the year, guys will pop up and then get more interested, and then guys have great second halves, right? So.
Yeah, and then Kyle, do they tell you players to look at, or do you just walk in the rink and whoever you do what you do, or do you sometimes have a list to say, hey, they say, hey, can you take a look at this guy? We hear good things. Does that happen too?
For the most part, for the first like half of the year, like it's pretty well just watch hockey and tell me who you like. Like there's not a whole lot of instruction or who to key on, that sort of thing. It's like, if you like a guy, like to speak up and say something or write a report. And if you don't like something about a player, like write it down and just kind of provide everybody with information. Later in the year, like if I haven't seen a team, let's say there's like a couple of like teams that you don't see just based on schedule or just being different area geographically, you end up seeing them like Patrick Sweeney or Kyle will be, hey, take a look at this guy, tell us what you think. Like some of us like him, some of us don't like him, that sort of thing. Like let's get your opinion on it. So you kind of get a heads up with that, but for the most part, it's just watch hockey and have an opinion.
That's great. So I want to talk a little bit more about the draft. That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, Kyle. I think a lot of Greyhound fans and just a lot of hockey fans in general, and a lot of sports fans, we see all the glamour and all the, and this is our pick and the press conferences and all that stuff. And I know there's a lot of questions about how you guys get to that decision. So before we get into that, the one thing I want to ask you is, obviously, Sault Ste. Marie, way up north, there's a lot of kids used to have a lot of reservations about coming up here and playing. Do you find that still today? Is it hard to recruit kids to come up to the Soo?
No. Short answer, no. It's no longer hard at all. I think the work that's been done here by like the last couple general managers in particular, both Kyles, and just the players that have kind of come through the program, the guys that have lit it up at the World Juniors. The list can go on and on and on. Just players that have played in this city that speak wonders about playing for the Greyhounds and how they were treated as players. You got Wayne Gretzky will talk about how great it was to play for the Greyhounds. Like there's literally, I've had in 5 drafts that I prepared for, one player has told me that he wouldn't want to play in Sault Ste. Marie. And that's that one player, his parents both played NCAA hockey, and they both said, listen, we just want him to play NCAA. And it's nothing against the Greyhounds. If he's going to play OHL, it'd be great, but we just want him to play NCAA. So literally, and he ended up playing NCAA, so good for him. But it's literally like nobody's told me no.
That's amazing. That's good to hear, actually. So I want to talk a little bit about draft day now, because this is something that a lot of people are curious about. So, obviously your draft days are pretty busy days. I imagine the meetings leading up to them are pretty intense. I know you usually come into town a week before the draft and spend quite a bit of time here talking about that. Can you just talk about before draft day? So what happens at those meetings prior to the draft? And then I'll have a question about what happens on draft day.
Yeah, so I'll usually come in on the Wednesday before the Saturday draft. If I could come in a week before, like my wife would be furious with me, but I would definitely do it. But it's I come in on the Wednesday, and then Thursday we start going over our lists that we have for the year that we'd established in the mid-year meeting. So obviously you usually have an OHL Cup after that mid-year meeting. You'll have playoffs and then regional championships. Kind of like that kid really kind of fell apart in the playoffs, so we'll move him down. This kid like it up at the OHL Cup, maybe we consider moving him up. But you don't really want to kind of like put a ton of stock into like 1 week. You kind of want to like balance it over the full year. So that's what we'll do is we'll just literally just sit down in a room with a list on a projector, and we'll just debate the list. Sometimes like it's easy. You'll have like a clear cut like top 5 guys, and then you'll move it down from there. Like I remember my first draft, we went in with the 2000s. We went with a list with only 114 names on it, and we debated it for 2 days. There's 300 kids drafted, right? So I remember sitting there like stressed, and like Vic, our head scout at the time, he's like, "Don't worry about it. There'll still be like 30 guys left on our list." So there's guys that the Greyhounds like, there's guys that other teams like, and there's certain teams value different things. And then so like I'm not kidding, we had about 30 names left on the list. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, we're gonna run out of guys. Like there's no way like everybody on this will still be there. But that's kind of what the pre-draft is it ends up being like a couple long days in the boardroom upstairs at the Gardens, and then you just debate it, and then you roll into draft day Saturday morning. We usually walk out of there pretty good Friday afternoon, go for dinner, and then come back, and then we're ready to rock in the morning.
So you're on draft day. You're sitting in the draft room, and there's a pick that comes up. Do you guys follow your board pretty consistently, or will you guys vary from the board depending on certain factors?
Yeah, we'll for the most part we kind of like block things in a range. One of the neat things that we like to do is kind of we do a mock draft just with our picks amongst the scouts. So like give us a range of where you think so and so could go, and then kind of if we had our perfect draft, in your opinion, what would you rank it out at? So we like to kind of play around with that, and then kind of have everybody in a certain range. Like obviously, you're not going to be like, okay, well, I'd like to take that Byfield kid in round 12. You know what I mean? Like it's not that sort of thing, but it's pretty realistic where you work out, and a lot of guys end up hitting like 5 or 6, 7 out of their 15 picks on the board in their mock draft. So and a long way to say that we'll stick to the script a little bit, but there are times where like a guy's still on your list that's way down, that's a guy that you really like on your list that's in a certain spot. You're like, all right, I think if we wait a little bit longer, we're gonna have to jump over this guy to get there. Or goaltending, for example, like you might want to take a chance on a goaltender at a certain spot. Like, okay, well, now's a good time to take a goalie. Let's jump up, take a goalie here. And that kind of where the list gets a little bit wonky, or maybe it's a good time to take an American at this point, and someone who maybe take a flyer on, maybe they end up coming and play on the team at some point. So the list is pretty It's more or less first day, like let's say, but we tend to stick to it pretty good.
Yeah.
Kyle,
so,
go
ahead.
question here, Bob. Kyle, as a scout on draft day, is most of your work as a scout done before draft day, or on draft day? Do you actually still say things like in the draft room? Will you say things, or your work is basically helping compile the list, and that's pretty much it?
No, I think so. Like the majority of our work is obviously done like beforehand, but I think on draft day, if we like a guy in a certain spot, or if he didn't end up in the right spot on our list, like according to me, if we get to a certain round where I think we may need to take a chance, or I'm like, hey, let's take like the most skill that's on the board. It may not be our next couple of guys on the list, maybe a guy lower, but that would be like if I really like a guy, I'll start speaking up. And I'll start saying, hey, Kyle, we should consider this guy at this spot. This would be a good fit for our team here. Here's why. So everybody kind of has a say. And I think it's great. And like ultimately, it's Kyle's decision at the end of the day, right? But it's like I think the fact that he'll listen to everybody and kind of take everybody's opinion at heart, and he encourages like to have that discussion and that dialogue amongst the scouts on draft day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So about that, so that kind of leads me. That's a perfect question, Jim, because it leads me right into what I wanted to ask next. So Kyle, you have a guy that you love. You have a kid that you're passionate about. We'll say, and it's the 7th round, and you have a kid that you truly feel good about. You love this kid, right? But he's not as high up on your draft board, or he's not as other scouts aren't as high on this player as you are. How do those situations, I'm sure they happen, I'm sure they happen on draft day. Is there a lot of getting up and a lot of emotion? Like, we need to take this guy. I believe in this guy. Or is it all, is it pretty subdued and it's just good, honest conversation?
I think it'd be a little bit of both. Like you hear stories of different draft room where guys will actually go outside and fight over picks. We haven't had anything like that, but like there's definitely been like guys banging the table. Speaking up, yelling at one another, be like, that player won't work for us. This player will. So it's like you're kind of getting down to the crunch time too. So you can see like your picks starting to come up. But when you get in those later rounds, you only get 2 minutes in between picks, right? So guys start speaking up a little bit louder. Like the challenge for being an Ottawa scout, I find a little bit is the league itself doesn't get the exposure that say a lot of the other teams do, because the HEO kids don't play in tournaments at all. Except when they do those all-star teams. They usually play at the Marlies in Peterborough, but they don't go to OHL Cup either. So it's tough. Like that first year where I was with the 2000s, we ended up drafting Jacob Legary in the 8th round. And he was the guy that like nobody had seen all year, right? Except for our head scout, Patrick, started bringing him up. There wasn't like a whole lot of momentum in the draft after that, right? So it's kind of like with the Ottawa guys, if I really like a guy, I got to speak up, and I got to be louder than everybody to get him on a certain spot on the list, and then kind of get everybody's attention in the room that like this is a guy that we need to have.
Well, that was a good pick for you, Legary. He worked out well. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot again here. You've been involved in 5 drafts now, I believe. So who are the top 5 players that you feel that you've had a direct hand in drafting? And they don't have to. I'm not saying they necessarily had to have a successful OHL career, but who were 5 players that you had a direct hand in scouting? We'll say, that you had a direct hand in scouting that went on to have successful careers.
With the Hounds or just anywhere?
Anywhere.
Well, like with the Hounds, I think like the first pick that I was involved with was Barrett Hayton. I think it's hard to argue that like if you redid that 2000 draft, I think he'd probably go number 1 now based on like all things being equal, right?
Yep.
In my opinion, at least. So like that was kind of a big one for the club. I think that was kind of like we were sitting there. We were picking 10th, and then Flint lost that pick in the morning, so we ended up picking 9th. So that made it a little bit easier that he'd hopefully fall for us. But that was a guy that I think we had targeted pretty well almost the entire year. He was like one of our top-rated forwards, if not the top-rated forward all year, and that's kind of like the position we were targeting. So, but that would be one for sure. obviously watching Shane Wright go through his exceptional status year was another big one where you're watching a player like that who's just dynamic. He's a year younger. He makes everybody around him better. He didn't really have like one tool that was like exceptional. Like McDavid had that speed, whereas this kid just like, he's just an assassin. He just thought his way around the ice a lot better than everybody. I really like Brent Clark in his draft year. It was that same year. He's a defenseman from the Ottawa area, but he played for Don Mills. He's one of the best defensemen I've seen in the draft of any year. Like the year we had Ryan O'Rourke, that was another big one where we kind of were going through their draft, and like he's one of those guys you have higher on your list, and you're like, he's never going to get there at 20. And then like the draft started going, and guys are going, and you're like, oh my God, he's going to be there, right? So it's like it was one of those days where like we were very excited again. I'm like, he was a guy that we talked about, like if he was old enough because he played up the year before, we probably would have taken him early in the draft the year before too. And then like just guys that like kind of blew you out of your seat, like as you're watching, like John Beecher, who we ended up drafting. He never came to the Hounds. But he plays at the University of Michigan now. Like we're sitting at OHL Cup. He scored 2 highlight reel goals that I'm sure you can find at YouTube if you Google them. And it's literally, he just like blew the doors off everybody. He looked like a men's league player playing, or like a 20s, and you're like, this is amazing. Tucker, who we got last year, was a great hockey player. I thought he was one of the best players in the whole draft. And then McConnell Barker, obviously we haven't picked this early in a long time. Not since McCann. I don't believe that we've picked 4th. He's going to be really good. I think like Hounds fans should be really excited about seeing this kid play. He's fast. He puts a little bit of weight on that frame. He's going to be really good. He can play everything at a high rate of speed. We were really excited to get him this past year. Like we were really excited. That was a happy for him, even though it was through Zoom. It would have been a lot happier if we were in person. But it was neat to kind of get him at that spot. Like we were very excited to get him. I need to kind of pick that early too, because normally we kind of just sit back. Like last few years we had success. You're like, all right, we'll pick at 20, and then we don't pick again. Like the O'Rourke year, we picked at 20th, and then we picked at 73rd, I think, to get Karen. So it was a long wait in between.
So about that, just quickly, the Greyhounds seem to have, to your point, you guys seem to have a gift for finding talent later in the drafts than other teams. You know, if you look at the roster, there's a lot of late round guys that end up making this team. And the first round picks, it's hilarious because, I mean, listen, I'll throw myself out there right now. Every time we make a first round pick, I'll send you a text like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, who is this guy? You know, and your response is always Bono. Wait until you see this guy. Like, he's good. And you and I'll go back and forth, and we'll debate a little bit. Obviously, I don't know what the heck I'm talking about because you're the scout, but it always seems to work out. And you guys seem to have a gift for finding talent later in the draft. What do you accredit that to?
Well, I think it's just a credit to like the work that the staff does. I think like everybody who's on staff like puts in a lot of games. They see a lot of hockey. I think the nice thing about the staff is we have guys that are kind of like, we have like some older guys, we have some younger guys, we have guys like a little bit more of a physical play, a little bit more on size. So we have like good discussion, right? So we kind of beat it up a little bit more. So I think like a good scouting staff, if you have all guys that kind of think the same, you're just going to kind of end up making the same sort of picks all the time, and then maybe you don't get any better. But like, it's nice to have guys that'll challenge you. Be like, oh, that guy's too small, he can't play, or that kid can't skate, but you end up just kind of having that great dialogue. And this is what I really like about this player, and this is why I think he'll be good. And you keep kind of beating that into it. And then I also think yes, we picked some good players late, but I don't think you can just pick a good player and put him in any pick a player late and put him in any organization who's going to have success. I think like the foundation that like Kyle has, the coaching staff, the player development guys. I literally think that like the foundation that the Hounds have kind of leads to those guys being able to step in and have success. And everybody talks about like kind of coming into the program and like knowing how to do it a certain way. And I think that kind of started a few years ago with the 98s, the 97s that kind of came through with Stanishin, Spears, Boris, Tim Gettinger, Verbeek, Frost, and continued on with Hayton. And then I think those guys that were there, like the younger guys, like Joe Carroll was on that team that year. So I think that like it's starting to rub off a little bit, like the guys that have been around for a while, like this is how the Hounds do it. We don't accept losing. We don't accept like cutting corners. We don't dump pucks in. You hear that all the time, but it's I think it's the foundation that they've set up and they've established that allows those guys to get picked late to be successful.
And Kyle, the question I have is, Sault Ste. Marie, again, not a big town, but we have a lot of hockey talent coming out of here going to major junior. Is there a lot of, and the Hounds do pick some local boys, but is there a lot of pressure? Is that why you see a lot of the local players go out of town because of the amount of pressure that is here? Is that why there's not many get drafted from the Sioux to the Greyhounds?
I don't know. I think that's a tough question. I think it's a lot of guys. I think you all grow up wanting to play for the Hounds, but it's just like it doesn't necessarily work out all that way. You know what I mean? I think if all things are equal, players that we really like, and the one's a local kid, we'll probably lean a little bit towards a local kid at times. I think like Connor Thomas, for example, was a kid that we really liked all year. Obviously, he's got the Hounds bloodlines with him, and he's a local boy. So that's a kid that we saw when we were available at that spot that we said, like, yeah, that'd be a great pick for us. But I think in terms of local guys, like, yeah, there are a lot of good players that leave to kind of have that exposure in minor midget. But they just end up getting grabbed by other teams, right? Like other teams like them and the teams value them. It's not that I don't perceive that we have any bias against the Hounds players or that we just love them more than anybody else. I think everybody's trying to get the same things. Like even your American programs are like, wow, they're talking of like this NCAA school is talking to this kid. Great. We're all trying to get the same good players, right? Like nobody's trying to like reinvent the wheel and hide anything. We're all trying to get the best players. So if there's great players coming up from the Sioux, which there always are, they're obviously going to get grabbed by somebody if we don't end up taking them, right? So I think that's just kind of, maybe it's a long-winded way of saying that, like we really like the local guys, but they end up getting grabbed by somebody else at times too. So I don't think it's anything to do with pressure, but I do think it would be a lot of pressure playing for the Hounds too. But I think for most Sioux guys, I think it would be a dream come true, right? So.
Kyle, here's a question. Maybe it's a little bit of a silly question, but it's an interesting because we talk about this all the time. Do parents play into the equation at all? Like I know, you hear that local drafts and stuff like that. Do you guys hear things like, hey, this parent might be a little bit high maintenance, we might want to stay away from them? Does that ever come into play at all, or no?
I think it's something that like if you see a parent kind of like acting a little strange at the rink, maybe you'll write a note on it. But I don't think, like at least for the Ottawa kids, like if a parent's like a super problem, I think if he plays for the Greyhounds and he's 9-hour drive away, like I don't think that's such a big a factor, right? So it's that's not really for me to say. I don't ever deal with the parents beyond draft day. Like some of them will talk to you at the rink, some of them will offer to buy you coffee or lunch or what have you, and you're just like, no thanks, and you just kind of keep moving on. But for the most part, it's I find the parents at minor midget are just kind of scared at you a little bit too. So you walk in and like, they see your black jacket and your notepad, and then they kind of get out of your way. If he says anything to you, they do anything the wrong way. So when you're there, you don't really see anybody on their worst behavior, but it's more or less the coaches will tell you that when you talk to them. Or I always find like the best guy to talk to too is the trainer, because he'll kind of give it to you straight regardless, right? And the trainers are usually the best guys too. So they'll just like, yeah, you don't want to deal with this guy's dad, he's crazy or this and that. But it's not really anything that I pay too much attention to.
Thank you.
No, that's great. So, Kyle, I just want you to talk a little bit about the Greyhounds this season. Obviously, we think that there is going to be some sort of you think there's going to be some sort of season, right? Which there probably will be, and we all hope there is anyway. Obviously, the Greyhounds were one of the finalists to get into the Memorial Cup, and they were trying to host the Memorial Cup between them and Oshawa. So obviously, the team has to be pretty decent. Can you talk a little bit about the team this year? About just what your expectations are for them. Can they compete for a championship? Those types of things.
Yeah, I think this was kind of the way we were setting it up anyways, was that we put in a Memorial Cup bid. Just look at the roster on paper. There's a lot of 19-year-olds coming back. I really like the look of our blue line with like Laguerre being an OA. You've got a couple excellent puck moving D and Calisti and Constantinu. You obviously got O'Rourke, who was a high pick this year in the NHL draft, and he's just a beast back there. And I think Holmes is somebody who's going to come into his own a little bit on the blue line this year, and you're going to see a lot more out of him. He's got that cannon on the power play. I think he can be a weapon. So that's 5 like elite level D right there. I think up front, like your Pitlick's back, you've got a lot of like go one forwards. I've always been a big Joe Carroll guy. I know he's kind of had an up and down time with the Hounds, but I've always said at team he's going to be a beast. I think he'll be a really good player this year. Alex Johnson, another guy from Ottawa, I think he'll have a great year. Ty Cartier is a great player. Roy Cairns is a great player. Like we're adding McConnell Barker this year. Like I really like the looks of this team, and like personally, I think like this is a team that could compete for a championship, like no problem. I just think with Malik coming back too, that kind of solidifies the goaltending position, and then you're laughing at this point. So my personal opinion is like if we would have had a full season, like we'd be talking about like what happened to the trade deadline at this point, right? So I think it's literally just it's something that like it kind of sucks that we're not going to see a full season, but when we get this whole team on the ice, I'm pretty confident that they'll be very good.
So we've been talking
about for sure.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about this idea, and I'm just kind of curious as to your opinion on it being obviously a high-end scout in the Ontario Hockey League. Would you be open for potentially adding 2 overage spots next year due to the fact that a lot of these kids lost their year this year? And obviously, you know, I don't have to tell you how many kids develop as 19-year-olds, right? So a lot of these kids now are going to lose a year. And that was just an idea we were tossing around. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but what are your thoughts on that idea?
I think it's a great idea to be perfectly honest with you. I think like it's not these guys' fault that they're going to miss out on a year, right? And you look at a lot of guys that end up turning in like a really good OA year into like a pro career. An example from Ottawa is the Ty Fellhaber kid who kind of had like an average to above average OHL career before that, no pro prospects. Then he played as an OA on a very good Ottawa team. He put up 56 goals and he signed to the AHL right after that. So I think those are the spots for the guys that are like you start mature a little bit more. You look the part a little bit more. You know the league a lot more at 19, 20, and then you can kind of show a little bit more what you can do, right? Like it's a fast league. Things move fast. Like when you're younger, it's tough to figure out. And once guys figure it out, some of them just like really start to blossom when they get older. So it's, I really think it would be a good idea to kind of add a couple extra away spots and do something for these guys, or maybe you just kind of grandfather the 2000 OAs that you had, you keep them, and then the ones kind of all get to hang around for one extra year, and then maybe you reset everything the following year. And obviously, I think that would be a huge benefit to the Greyhounds' current roster. But I think that would be a great idea too. Like, just it's not their fault, right? And there's a lot of careers that can be made out of this, and they've worked hard, right? So.
Absolutely. Two quick questions just before we let you go. First, you have 2 young boys that you're raising at home. Are you raising them to be Soo Greyhounds fans, Ottawa fans? Come on, like, you know, who are they going to be forced to cheer for as they grow up?
They're unquestionably Soo Greyhounds fans. There's little debate in that. A funny question the other day. We're in quarantine, and funny story. We're in quarantine the other day, and we set up the Wii for my kids to play. So they have NHL Slapshot. You can start as an amateur and move your way up. Dad, I can start in the OHL up. So I'm like, great. So I hopped on a business call. I came back and I'm like, hey man, what happened? He's like, I got drafted by Sarnia, so I quit. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I only wanted to play for the Hounds, so I quit. I'm like, all right, I guess that's great. So I just laughed about that. I'm like, that's pretty good. But he'll go to like power skating, hockey practice. He's wearing a Soo Greyhounds jersey all the time. My other son Emerson loves the Greyhounds too. He just doesn't love hockey. So Easton will just rock it all the time. He's got a Hound sticker on his helmet at all times here too, so he kind of stands out a little bit. But it's great. So yeah, that's no concern, Bono. Don't worry about that.
That's great. Yeah. And obviously, not to put you on the spot here, but last question. You know, I'm assuming you'd be perfectly happy being a Greyhound scout for the next, 15, 20 years. Just knowing you, I think you'd be okay with that. But I also know that you're a pretty ambitious guy, and you like to, and you're a bright guy. You're well respected in the hockey community. Do you have any aspirations to take this job as a scout to the next level, or are you okay doing this for as long as you need to?
That's a good question. It's something I've definitely thought about. Like we've had a couple guys leave our staff. Obviously, Chris Rock and Vic got pulled up to the Leafs. Dave Burson's with Carolina. Like you think about the NHL all the time too. It's always like everyone's dream to get there, but it's not. Like if I end up being the Hound Scout for the next 15, 20 years, it'd be great. Like it's something I always wanted to do. I always kind of joke around that like if I got fired from the Hounds, I'd probably never work in the OHL ever again because it wouldn't feel quite the same. Like maybe I just shot my career path in the foot there by saying that, but like it's just I want to see the team win as a fan and as a scout, right? Like I just think it would be. I remember what it was like in '93, and just even have a small part, or just even say I had a part in it, even though if I didn't have I had an insignificant part of it, it would be amazing, right? Like it's something you kind of grow up. And I remember my first training camp when I walked in the dressing room, I'm like, this is one of the coolest things I ever experienced. Like you go to the old gardens and it was always locked up when I was playing there, right? You never knew what was behind that door. And then kind of my first camp, I got to walk in there and I was like this is pretty cool. It's neat to be in there, and I take some pictures, show my son and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, all right, okay, day one you're a fan, day two you got to start working here. So I don't know. I think about the NHL too. I think that'd be pretty cool. But
well, after the last time I picked you up from the airport, you tried to throw me $20, and I told you not to worry about it. Just when you make the show, you owe me a couple tickets to a game. So I'll just throw that out there too and keep that on the radar.
not a problem, Bono. I'll hook you up if I get there.
No, but Kyle, honestly, man, I can't thank you enough. I've known you since we were kids. We played and battled hard in plenty of street hockey game, and you've always been a class act. You've always put up with me, grilling you with questions and grilling you with everything, and you've always been more than gracious by putting up with me. So I definitely appreciate that. You're a great guy, and we really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Bono. And anytime, man, that'd be great. Yep. And I'm sorry your Lions didn't win it this year, but there's always next year, buddy?
Oh, I know.
Thanks,
there's always the next 20 years. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, buddy. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It was nice talking to you.
Absolutely. Great job. Thanks. Well, Jim, just before we get into Mike here, what are your thoughts on our conversation with Kyle?
I thought he was awesome. You could tell how passionate he is about his job, and it's nice to see someone who does something that they love so much. And it's nice to hear that he has a lot of say in stuff that goes on, and he's treated well, and it looks good on the organization. And very good guy, very, very interested. That was very interesting to me.
Yeah, it's neat to see the passion. That's what I found interesting, right? Everyone thinks, like you can be a scout, I can be a scout. You got to watch hockey. I don't think we really realize the grind that takes place, right? It was neat to hear him kind of talk about that.
Yeah, awesome. So, how's it going, Mike?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good. We're good.
So joining us now, for those of you who don't know, we have game day announcer for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, Mike Pigeon. Mike, thanks for coming on today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It's good to see you all.
So, Mike, before we talk about the season, or before we get into the season, we've been talking to a lot of people. You have a job that a lot of people would love to have, right? You're really lucky to be able to be the voice of the Greyhounds, and you have that the big call every game, and you really get the crowd and everything riled up. So how did you get that job? How did that opportunity present itself to you?
It goes back all the way to 1998. I started doing the music, so I was the DJ. And then because of my background was in journalism, working on the radio, every time somebody would take time off, they always needed somebody to replace. So I always volunteered. I said, I'd love to give it a shot, right? I'm not shy to do those things. And they went through announcer after announcer from 98 till the SR opened, or till the Steelback Center opened. And then when that happened, they wanted somebody there that they could count on. So they asked me, would you be willing to do this as a full-time, gig? We don't want the people back who were there previously. And yeah, I jumped at the opportunity to be involved like that. And, since 2006 to now, it's been doing the announcing, a little bit spot duty before that. But the best years have been from 2006 forward.
I think we all have questions for you. So I'm going to ask this, and then we'll toss it over to Jim, and then we'll just kind of rotate here. But Mike, I've known you a long time, right? So you're a really mild-mannered guy. You're not the loud. You're a quiet guy for the most part, and you're just a very relaxed guy. Listening to you at Greyhound games is amazing because we see a total different side of you, right? We see that excitement, we see that drive, we see it's almost like youthful joy. How do you transform that from being this calm, mild-mannered guy to just being almost like balls to the wall in front of 5,000 people every night, right?
It's just the energy you get from being behind the microphone and then you seeing the crowd, right? I mean, there's probably games that aren't the most exciting games, but it's maybe, I look at it and we're maybe if we score a goal or something's exciting or whatever, maybe it's up to me to kind of get the crowd rolling, right? So it's, the job that the music people do in terms of setting up things, but, I love, finding names that I can say, well, draw the names out and stuff like that. I have such a great time there. I love doing, when the other team scores, it's like a monotone. So that's like when they score, everyone wants to hear that, right? But when the Greyhounds score, everybody wants to hear it, right? So I like to do the pauses in between penalties so we can hear the boos, right? So, the different things that you find that gives you that energy. And I feel sometimes that maybe the crowd feeds off that as well.
Mike, here's a question for you. I do a lot of football games and I do a lot of the SaberCats games, and you get the roster, 3 minutes before the game, and I start looking down at some of the names, and I'm like, I hope this guy doesn't make a tackle because I have no idea how to say this guy's name. So for you got a little bit of a prep time. You get the roster, the guys on the team. If you come across a name that's really tough to say, do you go ahead and ask that player, or do you go try to find a way to get the proper pronunciation? Because pronouncing names is important, right?
Without question, pronouncing names. And I get scared sometimes when I look at some of these rosters and you see the imports come in, and sometimes it's even the names that you would think would be the easiest names aren't pronounced that way. So it's like they give us a phonetic guide normally. And then I do the one for the Greyhounds as well. So when I see a name on the roster sheet for the other team, I will usually go to the radio team or to the TV team, depending on who's there, and kind of ask them how do you say that name. There's been the odd time, probably more than the odd time, where I get there late, or I just, I take it for granted that this guy, his name looks like Smith, but it's actually Smythe type of thing. You know what I mean? And next thing you know, the visiting broadcasters are looking up at you like you have three heads, and it's like, I can't believe you screwed that up. It's you got to put those things in the guide, right? That's why we do them. And there's been some doozies probably if you ask me the hardest one that I've ever come across, I was actually today, I was going through the rosters, but not so much the Greyhound roster, but I was looking at a Leaf roster. And the kid, I think he played for Oshawa, and he had a hyphen in his name. It was like Dargan Shintsev. But it's like 17 letters, and it's got two hyphens in it and whatever. And it's like, how do you roll that one together, right? It's like just – they say that it doesn't sound that great in the building, so sometimes if I can just talk closer to the microphone, nobody hears it anyways, right?
Yeah, I do that too. We get it in Soo Minor football where you're in the booth and you'll say that person's name wrong, and then and Bono's been there, and the parents will come running up to the booth. It's not Smith, it's Smythe, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But, at least you don't have to worry about the parent running up to the booth to talk to.
But I'll get Jerry every once in a while. Jerry will be looking at me sideways and say, "You just said that guy's name like that?" It's like,
Yeah.
So Mike, I'm just curious too. Obviously there is a creative aspect to being a public address announcer. How much flexibility, how much leeway do the Greyhounds or the OHL give you in order to allow you to kind of, use your personality?
I've never, from a standpoint of the team, I've never had any direction really, given to me other than here's your scripts. here's your scripts of the game, follow the scripts, make sure we pay the bills and get the ads in, and then the rest is up to you, right? So you just develop your style, right? After a while, you just you develop your style, and that's what I've been going with.
So, one of my favorite memories of any player that played for the Greyhounds, and it wasn't even necessarily because he was this great player, but I'm not even sure if it was you because I was younger, but the Greyhounds had a guy named Joe Sorosky who was a kind of a mid-range player. I think his last season he ended up scoring 50 goals in the OHL. But I still get goosebumps when I think of Joe Sorosky because the announcer, I don't know if it was you, it might not have been you, this might have been before your time, but the announcer, every time he would score, he would go, Greyhound goal scored by smoking Joe Sorosky. And it just made everyone go crazy, right? Because it was so cool to have that little nickname part there. How do you come up with nicknames? Have you ever thought about coming up with nicknames more for players? Do players ever tell you, hey, I didn't like that? How does that work with you?
I've never given a thought. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not one to give players nicknames. I mean, I've heard nicknames throughout the times. Call this player that this player likes to be called this. My biggest thing is the names that you can just draw out, right? I mean, Sergei Tolchinsky, the best name ever in terms of I could draw that name out forever. You know what I mean? Like it was fantastic. And so it's like you just, like I said earlier, you just develop your own style, and it's like like even when I say coming on the ice when I announce the team, it's like nobody's ever done it like that before. It's just something I go with, and I enjoy it for as long as I can continue to do it that long.
Yeah. And that's your style, Mike. You're very professional. You don't want to use the nicknames. Not that there's anything wrong with it. You use like a professional style, or everyone has their own style. And not that it's one way is right or wrong, but you're very professional. You're very good at what you do. So
thank you. Thank you.
Who's your favorite? I mean, you just mentioned Sergei Tolchinsky, but do you have a couple I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you have a couple favorite calls or a couple favorite names that you would just love calling?
Well, I just mentioned the one. Probably my favorite is Tolchinsky. Yeah. I would have to say Yuri Tolusti.
That was a good one.
Yeah. I loved it because both. It was good. The 1 year, I think it was. Remember Jeff Richards played for the House. Yep. The year Trevor Daley was there. So that year, I think that was probably the year where we had the most Sioux players. So I think we had the likes of Alan Nolan was on that team. Yeah. Can't remember else. Quinnell. No, I don't know if Quinnell was on. The kid from Echo Bay. Nico Tomey was on that. So when you say those names, when they ever, as long as they score or whatever, you kind of, it felt good to say those names. But I'd say like the Tolusti and Tolchinsky would probably be the two best names that we've had that I've been able to say. Wow.
You just mentioned Alan Nolan, and there's a name I haven't thought about in a while. As soon as you mentioned Alan Nolan, I don't know if there's video of this. There's got to be somewhere. But Alan Nolan, I'll never forget him for this. It was at the Memorial Gardens. Hounds were playing the London Knights, and Alan Nolan laid the biggest hit I have ever seen in a hockey game on Rick Nash at center ice. And I'm talking center ice. And Rick Nash, it was the only game I've ever seen a player actually get taken out on an ambulance at a Greyhound game. Rick Nash had to get taken off in an ambulance. That was the biggest hit I'd ever seen.
Yeah. When he played, I can't remember if it was a goal or a penalty, but I called him Ted Nolan.
Oh,
I think it was a penalty. Yeah, Soo Greyhounds penalty, to Ted Nolan, and I was like, oh god,
Yeah. Now, Mike, we hear rumors now of the league coming back and possibly having hub cities and stuff like that. If the Sioux became a hub city, would that be something that you would be interested in putting some time in and doing those games?
It would be exciting for me. The good thing for me is my office is right across the street from the building, so it's like you have to go back and forth during the day and do games and whatnot. Yeah, like everybody is we're all fans, right? So I got I got one of the greatest gigs where I can be a fan, watch the game, and get to announce at the same time, and probably get one of the better vantage points as well. So, yeah, I mean, without question, I would be all over that if they announced something and they said this is what's going to happen going forward. But we all can't wait for that moment.
No kidding.
Two quick questions for me, and then I'll hand it over to Jay. First thing, Mike, you've been around a long time. What's your favorite memory?
My favorite memory is probably going back to that year where we had Trevor Daley, Jeff Carter was on that team. Paul Ballantyne was probably one of my. I can just remember that year distinctly because I sat with those guys at the banquet, right? So it's like here's the Paul Ballantyne. He was drafted and stuff like that, but those were the years where you could be as close to the players as you wanted to be. And that kind of changed over the years with management and stuff like that. But I mean, the years where we could. I could go down to the dressing room. I could talk to the players. I could ask them what, how they say their names, what they wanted to hear, those types of things. Those were probably the best years. Like the 2007 year, maybe too, when we went for it. We loaded up. I think we had Wayne Simmons when we had him that year when the Memorial Cup was in Kitchener. We loaded up thinking we had this one, and of course, we didn't, right? We kind of faltered there. That was a good season. And then, the more recent one where we had Kachuk and those players and so on were probably some good moments because the building was full, the place was loud. You could feel the energy as soon as you walked into the building. Those are the best moments and the best memories.
And one thing, Mike, not to toot your horn here or anything, but I worked in the penalty box for a lot of years, a visiting penalty box. And one of the things that we would always try and catch you on is, you always say there's 1 minute remaining in the second period, or there's 1 minute remaining in the third period. So two parts. The first is we've always waited for you to miss a call, to miss, there's 1 minute remaining. And in all of our years, that only happened one time. And I'm sure you'll remember because I called you up right afterwards and rubbed it in your face that we've been waiting for this. So, outstanding job there because I know you can get caught up quite a bit.
Well, it does take a lot of focus, especially, if they just scored a goal, if there's a penalty, if there's a lot of penalties, you're busy writing things down. You know what I mean? Like there used to be a time where the clock was kind of linked to me upstairs, so I get a buzz when it was close, or the penalty box there attendants would call me and say, it's close to 1 minute. But other times it's just, you're looking at the scoreboard and it's like, it's 1 minute left. It's like, I get it at 59 seconds, I can still do it, eh? And so, there's people watching me all the time, waiting for me to screw up. Put it that way.
Oh, I believe it. And and Jim, sorry, just one last. One last thing quickly, Jim.
Okay,
so Jim mentioned earlier about your professionalism, Mike. One thing I've waited for you to hear, and this is a pet peeve of mine. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but this has become a pet peeve of mine. In games when the Hounds would be up 7-1 in the third period, I just wanted for once for you to say, there is 1 minute remaining in the game. But you will never say that. You always say 1 minute remaining in the third period, no matter what the score is. There's never that assumption that the game is over. And that's something we always joke about actually in the penalty boxes. Oh, the Hounds are up 12-2. I wonder if Mike will say it. And you never do. So well done. And definitely
do it this year, right?
Yeah.
Mike, one more question for me. Yeah, simple yes or no answer, and then I'll let Jay go ahead. Will Russell Wilson be a Seahawk next year?
Yes.
Okay. I knew you were going to say that, but.
Yes, he better. Put it that way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Now, a question for all three of you guys is I didn't want to ask Kyle because he is, like I say, Mike, I know you're part of the organization too, but if we did end up having hub cities for this season, and Sault Ste. Marie is one of them, do you think you're going to see pushback from the community to bringing teams here?
I'll answer that.
There's always
I'll go first.
everything, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead first, Jim.
Well, I mean, everything that happens in the world, there's pushback from, right? You're never going to make everyone happy. I would love it. I mean, I think it'd be great for the city, and you know, we're a good spot for it. We're pretty safe here. We have a little bit of COVID here and there, but I think it would be great, and I think it's a great place for it. There's hotels all around. I think it'd be great for our local businesses, our restaurants and hotels. So, but yeah, people would complain. People complain about everything, right? You're never going to make everyone happy. So that's my answer. Bono, go ahead.
Took the words out of my mouth, Jim. I think it would be a great idea. I don't think it would go over. I think, you know, knowing, if you look at how the Soo has been reacting to even cross-border students and, you know, and people going across to go to school or workers, you know, there's been a lot of pushback with that too. I think that there would be a lot of pushback bringing people into the Soo. Now, that being said, I almost think the majority of people would be okay with it. But in this city, it seems like the minority is always the louder voice, causing a bigger stir a lot of times. And I think that would be a big, big concern. My thing is I would love to see what city council would have to say about this, because our city council right now, it seems like they kind of teeter between trying to satisfy the minority, but they're also business oriented, right? So I don't know. It'd be tough, but I mean, I'd be curious to see.
I mean, I agree with what the two of you are saying as well. I mean, there's always going to be the people that complain, and rightfully so. I mean, the Soo and Algoma district has had the low numbers, and to bring all those, you know, people in from Southern Ontario. I do think, though, I mean, I just think logistically, I just think of like when the visiting teams come to town, and sometimes we even have teams when there's times when there's two teams in town at one time, like in the OHL, because they'll play the next night or whatever, right? The hotels, like there's 3 hotels downtown that you would never even know they're here. So if like that bubble mentality can almost be achieved by, you know, the team staying downtown and stuff like that. So, I mean, so you hardly would even know the players are here outside of what it would do for the economy. I mean, with them comes their parents and fans, and however that works, who knows? But I mean, it's an opportunity for us. It's like if it's something, you know, we'd be silly not to entertain it. We're gonna get people, without question. We're gonna get people that are gonna be like, not in my backyard type of thing, philosophy, and rightfully so. Like if there's any time where it's justified, it's now. But there's also, you know, the other side of it where, we need to have something going.
But on the other hand, right now, and I know because this season, who knows what's going to happen. But if our city said no to having a hub, that's surely going to kill our chances in the next couple of years of Memorial Cup, don't you think?
Possibly, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's a good point. I think that we could do it, and I think the city would be on board mostly with strict protocols, especially for the 2 weeks prior the quarantine. And as long as those rules and regulations are followed, I think that's the important part. And if that happens, I do think that the city would be on board. I just think that the city would have to be prepared and be able to present the safetiness and present that we can do this safely to the people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
And I know that it's a professional level, but last year in the NHL, it proved it worked in the NHL. So you could have do it in a hub where they are in a bubble, more or less, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, we really appreciate you coming on. You kind of gave us a little bit of behind the scenes, and you know, you're a great guy. You're a huge ambassador for youth sports in the city. I know you coach football quite a bit. You do a lot of work with hockey, obviously. You know, you're not getting rich being the public address announcer. We all know that, and we all know how much work you put into it, right? So,
you never asked me my salary.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Julio's chicken. That's it.
Yeah, I know.
That's pretty good salary, though.
Yeah. So we really appreciate you coming on, Mike, and you know, you give a great insight, and we look forward to it, man. Like, you know, you're gonna have kids. I'm telling you, you're gonna have kids in 20 years that when they think of the Soo Greyhounds, they're going to remember Mike Pigeon's voice, and they might not know it's your name, but your voice is always going to be associated with the memories that take place in that arena, and that's got to be a pretty good feeling.
Yes, for sure, absolutely.
So, thanks so much.
Before we let you go, Mike, Christiane Monico tells me you're too overpaid with chicken.
Yeah, I eat my worth.
Yeah. And lucky the three of us aren't on the staff either. That'd be really terrible when it comes to
Well, I do have to compete with another Boniferro in that room, so it gets pretty tough sometimes.
He always shows up when there's food, too. Doesn't matter what's going on. If there's food comes out, Bono shows up. We could be doing stuff
I'll be
at the
there.
football field. All food comes, all of a sudden there's Bono. And that's
Mike, I can't thank you enough for taking the time tonight. And next week, we didn't have Jamie Henderson tonight because he had a league call with the Great North Midget League. So we're going to have Jamie Henderson of the U18 and Dom DeLuco on the show next week. So, Mike, thank you very much. And Jim and Tony, thanks again for this week.
Good. We can get to the Bachelor. Thanks.
All right. See you guys.